never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. Barnesy here, your host of the NRL Allstars podcast, back again for another preseason team preview for 2026. And for this one, we have crowd favourite Billy Marrion back on board. Billy, welcome to your first episode of 2026, mate.
Hey, mate. Raring to go through fluctuations, frustration, excitement, then I give up. Back for another one.
Well, you're an OG All-Star, and as much as people would like you probably on a little bit more, we will definitely get you on a few times through the year on the rotation.
People's champion, are
People's champion, mate. I get messages about, when's Billy's next episode? Is Billy coming on and stuff? I think that they love it, mate. So you're going to have to keep you in the rotation still. The people have spoken, but obviously we're going to talk about your Parramatta Eels because you are an Eels supporter. So you're going to have to give me all the lowdown. But your Eels this year, I think there's some quiet optimism. How are you feeling about them?
I have some quiet optimism every year, mate, although it's quiet optimism. When you said, I was talking to someone at work today, when you said, we're going to do a 90-minute podcast on the Eels, I thought, Jesus Christ, I can probably talk for about 3 minutes. Moses, a couple of others, a cheapie, and then, that's about it. But I'm sure there's a bit more there. Look, mate, I think forward pack decimated on and off over the last few years. I think we've had way too many second rowers for God knows how long. A couple of good players come through, then leave. I think if we can just get Moses healthy, new half in there, and just blood some of the kids, see if the young blood, like the two Argues, go well, I think we might be able to win a few more games than last year. I don't think we're a top 4 team, but no, we can give it a bit of a shake. So see how we go.
That's fair enough. Well, look, we are going to talk the Eels in depth through the players, but first of all, we're going to have a bit of a look at the draw and also a bit of the ins and outs as well of their recruitment drive. Before we do that, quick plug, because we love One World Courier here on the All-Stars podcast. One World Courier are a great supporter of the show. They have been for 3 years straight now. And if you or a business that you work for has any shipping or freight needs, you need to go to oneworldcourier.com.au today, because they are the best people to send anything with. Basically what it is a compare the market type of website where they'll show you all the different shipping options for you. It doesn't matter how big it is, whether it's a pallet or how small it is if it's a parcel. You can have a look at all the options and just choose whatever carrier you want to go with. And once you do choose that carrier, you don't have to deal with that carrier because they'll deal with it for you. One World Courier will do it from point A to point B for you. It's really no fuss and super simple. So when you sign up to a free account today, it'll ask you, where did you hear about us? And you just say NRL Allstars podcast, and they'll go, we got your back. Because you're a listener, we'll take good care of you, give you a great rate card to start with. So oneworldcourier.com.au, great supporters of the show. Please support them to support us if you have any of those freight or shipping needs. The Eels draw is the first thing that we're going to talk about, Billy. And look, for me, we always talk about it on this podcast. The first month and then the second month are pretty much the 2 blocks that you're breaking up when you're really having a look at the SuperCoach draw and how it's going to affect you for your round 1 starting team. And the first 4 weeks, I don't love for the Eels. 3 out of the first 4 games are away. They start off with Melbourne away, then Brisbane away. They got the Dragons at home, which is going to be a decent matchup. And then they're meant to be away versus the Panthers, but they do get that as a sneaky home game. So really, 2 out of the 4 are at home because the Panthers have no home for 2026 still. So it's 3 sides there out of the 4, Billy, that could make the top 4 this year. But then you go to round 5 and go, hang on, we got the Tigers. Parra loves putting points on the Tigers. And then they got the Gold Coast Titans, followed by the Dogs and Manly. And then they go into the Warriors, the Cowboys and Melbourne Storm again before they have that big bye round of round 12 where they aren't playing. So mixed bag. Certainly for the first month, I don't love it. And when I first looked at it, Billy, the first thing I kind of thought to myself was maybe it's a wait and see on some of these guys, and that Tigers matchup, depending on how the Tigers are starting off, might be the time to start to look at players.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but then you think, all right, so you run the gauntlet basically for 3 out of the 4 games just to try and get to 1 or 2 games where you might score some points. Obviously, the Tigers game is going to be high scoring. I think we talk about this every year. It's always 36-32 or something like that, usually in the second half or first half by one team than the other chasing. But the question is, do you really want to go that hard for underpriced players, potentially sacrifice some points in the first 3 or 4 games just to get potentially larger scores there, only to hit a tough run there? It's kind of like a bell curve that you're waiting for, and there's no guarantee of any points when you're at that peak. So then you've obviously they've got the bye this year. Surprisingly, I think this is the first time that they've had that round 12 off.
Yeah, they're normally a target team for that big bye round, aren't they?
Yeah, usually because everyone's playing, no one makes Origin. So I love my Eels. I think a lot of SuperCoach players tend to pick at least 1 or 2 players from their own team, just because it makes it a pod, it makes it interesting. It's nice to cheer for one of your own players, but I honestly really struggling to find one apart from Moses that I would want to get. And do you really want to get an undervalued half playing against three of the top 4 teams? Like it's a lot of money to invest in a person that is going to make money, but you don't want to play. You don't want to have 550 grand sitting on the bench. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough start. There's no getting away from it. And I think certainly when you look at the back half of the year, you kind of go from after round 21 versus the Panthers, we've got round 22 onwards where it looks a bit better. They got round 22 versus the Tigers. Then they hit Souths, the Cowboys, the Dolphins, the Sharks, and the Dragons. So that run home for them is pretty good, and it's a decent time to maybe target them. But when we're having a look at the turnover, Billy, and what the changes are for the Parramatta Eels with the player movements, I guess the big one is going to be Jonah Pezzett coming in, which certainly for SuperCoach is very relevant. I think he'll make them a better team as well. I really like him.
Yes.
And then they've got Jack DeBellin, pretty good veteran signing. And then they've got Brian Kelly coming in to replace Lomax, and Kelly should play in the centres there. Decent, but obviously when you have a look at their losses, they've lost Dylan Brown. He wasn't very good last year. Didn't get played a hell of a lot in the second half of the season. But he's still a quality player, and probably the other ones of note. Well, really, Dylan Brown's probably the main one, but we've got old SuperCoach favourites like Bryce Cartwright that ran their last race 2-3 years ago, and Shorty Lade and stuff's retired. So, yeah, not too bad. I think that they've probably gained more than what they've lost despite Dylan Brown. So, the roster looks good.
Yeah, there were a couple that sort of poked a little bit of interest. I mean, the recent addition of Kelly, if you go and look at his stats, he can really break games open. Awkward price point given the draw. Like if you go and look at his sort of run, he's one of the like Moses, sort of flat track, sort of bully type player that you want to get in. So it's not really ideal to start, but he's one of the options. I'm excited to see how Jack Williams goes this year. I think he can sort of step up with some more minutes. And
we're going to get into the players, so don't go into it too much. But I want your prediction, mate. Tell me, what's your range? Because I'm going to go for the Eels 7th to 12th as far as sort of a range for me. That's where I reckon they can finish.
As to where they can finish, 7th to 12th. I think more than likely is probably slipping a little bit further. That probably sort of 10th to sort of 14th. But I think where they can is what you said.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if they're bottom 4. I think that they're better than that. Let's have a look at the players, though. We've started to allude to a few of them and chatted a little bit. It probably needs to be said with the Eels, one thing that stands out is there isn't as many players to talk about as other teams for SuperCoach purposes. They just didn't have very many players that average 60 plus. They don't have a huge amount of recruitment that is going to be, massive, but they do have a couple of key ones to talk about for sure. So the first guy we're going to talk about is Iongi. He really was a revelation his first year, averaged 66 points per game. We thought he would be good. I don't think that he started off quite as well as what he could have, but I think that he certainly warmed into it. He's going to be 640,000 and he's fullback only, and that's obviously the issues for him. But it was a really good debut, and really, when you look at 66 as his first full year of first grade, you go, well, at his age, you could already see the improvement through the year, and he was a little bit lacking in tons. He only had the 2 tons where he only just got across the line. 60 plus, he wasn't consistent in doing that. Only 52% of his games were 60 plus. And he had 8 tries in 21 games, which is adequate, but he probably could add on a couple more. So, It's especially going to be important for draft players, so we need to talk about them as well. But if you factor in that he could score an extra couple of tries, that Eels could be a bit better, Moses will be there more. They've also got Pezzett coming in now. And also the fact that 66 is his first year of first grade, really, he could have some natural improvement. Do we see like a 72 type average coming from him maybe? Could he be a bit of a smoky for your third fullback spot if you're using your flex or for draft? Is he someone to maybe target as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you ignore the draw, it was just bringing up the number now. There you go. If you ignore the draw, he averaged 80 last year from round 7 to the rest of the year. That's from round seven to the rest of the year, there were no real low scoring games. So his kick returns are there. He's got clutch. That was with Moses out. That was also with Dylan Brown as a running as 7 from a few games, and he's not really a number 7, more of a running 5'8". So there was no one. We don't really have a decent hooker. So wasn't much high class steering the ship. We lost a crap load of games. We're going to win more. We've got our number 7 back. At the very least, if he even just holds that kind of form, that kind of average of 80 over a season average of 66, I'd say he's certainly undervalued. I mean, you've got to give him a few mulligans. Like those first 6 games were basically getting into his first full year under the spotlight. What's his name? Old mate went to Penrith last year, just thrown to the deep end. So if you give him a few mulligans for those first few games, give him some time to sort of come in. Now he's coming in with a year under his belt. I'm not going to say he's going to hit the ground running with that sort of average, but he's not going to be punching out 25, 35, which he did notice in half those first games. I think you'd probably expect a floor of sort of 50 now.
Yeah, and he's that sort of mid-40s base power type of guy as well. So I agree with you. And I will say, like, funnily enough, if you have a look at last year, against the Storm, he scored 69 points, and then in the second game against them, he sat out. And then you have a look at the Dragons, and he went 107, and then he went 86 against them. And as far as Penrith go, he went a solid 52 and 71. So his actual average against those first 4 sides that we said are quite difficult is actually more like a mid-70s average anyway. So he did that and showed it against those sides, which I actually really liked about him last season with Oyongi, because he did seem to still be able to step up and play well against the better sides.
Yeah. There's just a caveat here. Being an Eels supporter, I obviously watched their games a lot closer than anyone else, just the same as you with your Roosters and everyone with their own sort of teams. Watching him is frustrating because you look at him from a footy perspective, thinking like he's a good little up and coming player, but then you look at him from a SuperCoach perspective and you see him on sort of 35, 40 points and go, geez, you're not really doing much. And then 5 minutes before the end of the game, try assist, line break assist. There you go. There's that 60 upgrade to sort of 66, 68 after the upgrades. They're not. It's not a happy watch. You'll be stressed out of your head. Looking at the scores are very consistent. I'm just going backwards from the end of the year, right? 63, 84, 53, 98, 53, 71, 86, 104. So there's decent, seems to be a 60, 80, 60, 80, 60, 80. But those last 20, 30 points, you're always getting them in the last 10 minutes of the game. Like he does get them. They do count, but you're going to be tearing your hair out watching the game.
You can't do that, mate. You've got none left. So don't go with him. Make sure you stay off him.
I'll scratch them off. Yeah, no worries.
So I think we both agree, like Oyongi is going to be a good draft prospect, actually. I think he's a bit of a smoky, but a bit too hard probably to go for, despite the fact that we both like him. When we're going through the next one, I think this is going to be a Billy special, because you mentioned Jack Williams. And I tell you, I have to apologise to Jack Williams, because I, in the past, I've always rated him as a decent player, but I've sort of thought he was a bit of a toiler. I didn't really think Jack Williams was a fantastic buy for the Eels. I certainly didn't think he was going to be a starter. I thought he was going to be a benchy. And he proved me wrong. He was really good last season, averaged 62 points per game. It was a career year for SuperCoach. Because of that, he's going to come in at 610,000. So it is expensive, but it's interesting when you have a look at it, because I think Jason Rolls kind of fell in love with him. And there's 2 different ways to look at him as well. He made himself quite versatile, where he had a heap of games starting at prop, And then he also had a heap of games at edge back row. Now, at prop, he was a 61.5 average. On an edge, he was just over a 63 average. And that's key there because he didn't really get much attack, and he's not the sort of guy that can get attack. But if he's on an edge for an entire year, then you'd expect that attack to go up from 2 tries. And that was 1 try as a prop, 1 try as an edge as well. So you look at it and go, well, you know what? Riles loves him. If he keeps getting those big minutes and starts on an edge like he did for like a third of last season, his base is sort of in the 50s. And as an edge back rower, that's really good. Base power just isn't really there with him, and neither's the clutch attack. But if he's on the edge long enough, maybe he warms into it and gets a bit more. So I couldn't go with it in Classic, but I do kind of think that you're going to get what you pay for, which is going to be a pretty close to a mid-60s type of solid type of guy. And in draft, I think that you'll get him really late, and he does seem to be a bit of a Jason Riles favourite at the moment.
Yep, 100%. Just going to add something in there. Not sure whether you missed it or whether you were just doing the aggregates. You're right. He does average 62 when playing at prop, but when you dig into the numbers a little bit closer, that's his total, all right? His first 3 games, he only played for smaller minutes. 45, 58 and 54 minutes. Obviously had a big work ethic. Riles obviously loved him. His minutes then went right up. 66, 73, 72, 60, 62, 69, and 80 minutes. When his minutes went up, his average goes from 62 up to 71. All those scores were in the green and the dark green without a try. So I would, if he's starting 8, I would expect an average of 70. If he's starting on the edge, it's lower. It goes well on the edge, but he's actually better in the middle, mate. So if he's currently priced at 62 and starting, I would expect a 70 average.
Well, that's big. So 8 points of value is huge. And just to be clear with those stats that you look at, so you're omitting the first few games where he's a prop, but they were lower minutes, yeah.
I just omitted the first 3 games where it was his first 3 games as prop lower minutes. He's obviously the alpha now.
Yeah, that's a difference in our numbers. I like that. Like I could see it happening. I think that he showed enough last year and Riles trusts him. I guess the question is, Jack de Belin's come in. How much does that impact Jack Williams if Jack Williams is going to be at that sort of prop middle role?
I wouldn't say too much, and the reason is the last few years the Eels have had a plethora of second rowers and locks and rotated through the middle a fair bit, particularly with Hopgood. Hopgood probably goes up forward as well, and brings de Belin in, and depends on how much they do the minute share. But de Belin's an old head, mate. He's good stalwart, probably comes in for 35 minutes. He's a tackle bot, doesn't really offer anything in attack anymore. He's just a solid guy, solid head. He's probably there to plug a hole at a decent price and a good old head for the rookies. I can't see him taking too many minutes. I wouldn't worry about him at all, particularly with the fact that we've got rid of all that excess fat around that sort of 11, 12, 13.
Well, there is another gun in Josh Addo-Carr that we need to discuss, but I kind of like the forward chat that we're having. So we're going to skip him as a gun, even though he is a gun, because I want to delve into that, because I've got fallen guns in Jack de Belin here and Hopgood that I want to talk about since we're talking about Jack Williams, because these guys could all impact each other, because they're all going to be potentially middle rotation guys, although he may use Williams or an edge possibly. And Jack de Belin's come over. I think you're not writing him off, but saying he's more going to be a veteran guy. So you're probably expecting 50 odd minutes from Jack de Belin, and you just think that he's going to slot in and not really impact the other guys as much.
I don't think he'd even get 50, mate. I think Hopgood's the 50, 55 minute guy at starting lock. De Belin probably takes 35 off the bench for a spell, just sits there, tackles. That's
Well, Hopgood has generated a lot of interest because he's a guy that you can have at your front row forward now, and he's 517,000. So when you're having a look at Hopgood, 2023 he was a revelation, 73 points per game, and then 67 points per game in SuperCoach in 2024 was also very good. And then all of a sudden he drops to 53 points per game, and it's coincided with his minutes, and that's the important thing. He's gone 66, 60 minutes, and then 53 minutes in the last 3 years. So it's been going down. His PPM's still been between that 1 to 1.12 range in that time, but his minutes have been an issue. Now, I'm sure that you've looked at the stats because you are a stats man, but there is some hope there. When he was starting prop, he averaged 65.4 points per game and played 63 plus minutes when he started as a prop in the middle there.
Yeah.
That's better than his season averages by a fair bit. And to me, it's about two things, Billy. It's all about the minutes and it's all about the offloads. I could not believe when I looked at the offload differences. Last year, he had 86 total points in offloads, which was like not even 2.5 points a game. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then the year before, he goes from 86, he was actually 100 and... Oh, sorry, he's actually 7+ points per game. So he's gone from 2.25 per game last year in offloads to 7+ the year before, and the year before that he was over 8 points per game in offloads. You know, in a few year span, going from 8 points per game in offloading down to 2.25 is a massive drop in SuperCoach. You know, that's 6 points you're leaving on the table, and he was an offloading beast. If we see the offloading come back and the minutes go up, there's some real value there, obviously, in Hopgood.
Well, it can't be any worse. Look, I think I was just going back and looking at the figures again. I think you're right. I think Hopgood possibly does start in either the 8 or the 10 next to Junior. I forgot that we've got Dylan Walker there as well, who's probably sold or decent enough in the 13. I think the fact that Jack Williams actually played the last 1/3 of the season on the edge probably means he was probably either preferred there or moved there to accommodate the others. So I don't think the coach is going to go from having a guy at 8 and then moving him to second row for the rest of the year. They'd decide, you know what, I'm going to put you back at prop. He's probably got that second row spot. And if he does, I'm not really interested in Jack. If he does get the front row due to injury, I'd be keen. But that second row, no. So I think if that means if Hopgood goes to the 8, no, I know everyone says, 13's no different from the 8 and 10 anymore. Like in a role, it isn't really, but the 8 and 10 still do the dominant hit ups. So I think if he's going to be taking the hit ups with Junior, I think there's a much better chance of that offload coming back. So I think the value is probably the Hopgood rather than Jack Williams.
Yeah, and it sort of doesn't make a difference, but it does sometimes, because if you look at the numbers, it did make a difference to Hopgood. When he was a 13, he was nowhere near as good, and Riles wasn't as confident giving him the minutes. When he was a prop, he got the minutes. So I agree with you. I think that the rotation is going to be Hopgood starting at prop, and I think that you're going to have JDB off the bench potentially, and he can either play 13 or prop. And then you've got Jack Williams on an edge, and that's probably how it's going to work out. If it works out that way, I can see the 53-point price point of Hopgood being 10 points undervalued. And that's great because you can make $100,000, but you can also keep someone like that around because you've gotten them at a good price and they're at a spot in front row forward where often we don't want to spend trades or we don't want to spend much money. He's at a good price. You can keep him around there, and he might even give you as much as a 65 average if his offload really comes back. So, I like it.
First year that he came out, he had a 101 and 124 versus Storm and the Sharks in the first 2 rounds of not last year, the year before. That's massive.
Well, he was offloading the ball like it was a bomb, and he had to get rid of it. It was just crazy, the offloading that he was doing when he first came in and did that.
4 offloads each game. It was where were the stats? Yeah, 4 offloads each game. We had 2 try assists in a couple of games. Yeah, he was just consistently taking every second hit up.
It's massive work.
That's what you want. Old school Paul Gallen.
I tell you something too. He did start last year a bit busted, and that hindered him, I think, last year as well. So, yeah, there's every reason to think that at 517,000, it's a decent stab at front row forward. Let's move along. We've talked about the forwards, and we missed out on Josh Addo-Carr, who was one of the only a few players, like 3 players that averaged 60+ in the Eels side. He is someone who I think new players or casual players always gravitate towards because it's fun to own the Fox. He's got the laugh. He's sort of a likable guy when he chats to the fans and everything, and he scores tries, so people just get on him, right? It's often a mistake. We've got a mistake category of players that we normally talk about in the preseason. He's normally in it. I'm not going to go that far this year because I saw some things in his game that I liked last year, but at 591,000, I just don't see the value for round 1, and a couple of reasons, Billy. One, he scored a lot of tries. So 19 tries in 22 games, even for someone like the Fox, is a really good strike rate. I will say it's the first time he's averaged 60+ since 2021 as well. But to give him some credit, raw base of 24 is really poor. But when you look at his base power, He's actually been better than what he was before. He only actually had 3 games sub 40. And normally you can book the Fox in for like 7, 8 games sub 40. That was the type of player he was at Melbourne. He's been a lot better like that. So I'm going to give him credit, but I'm also going to say I've got zero interest in him, especially with that draw and looking at that strike rate and the numbers from last year, buying him at 591. I'd rather take a stab at 380 or something when he bottoms out at some point during the year for a run.
Yeah, I think the only real advantage to him this year is that Lomax is gone. So instead of that little high ball kick to that right centre looking for him, there might be a few more going left. Like that, we don't have anything on the right, so it might be old school. Semi Rajada. What's his name, Sivo type players out the back now.
Mate, you're talking my language. We can't go an Eels podcast without referencing the great men, Semi Radradra and Mike.
Is he still going around? Surely he's
Semi's still going Japanese rugby, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he was carving Japanese rugby, mate. I saw a thing online, one of the other content creators put it up, and it was, who's the best wingers ever to play, and you got to rank them, and it was like all the best wingers, right? You got Brian Toto from the current gen, Brett Morris was there, Big Dell, Wendell Saylor was there, and they put Semi Radradra in there. I tell you what, mate, a couple of Eels tragics went, no, I'm putting Semi near the top. I was like, wow, I know he was good, but geez, he's very fondly remembered.
He had some runs. He reminded me of Jono Lomu sometimes. You just see him you go for the corner and step back in and go over the top and then put the ball down one-handed. Like it looked like a golf ball. Yeah, I was
right. Well, we will talk about the player that everybody's been waiting for us to talk about because he might be the most relevant, but also polarising at times SuperCoach option, and that is Mitchell Moses. So Mitchell Moses is going to come in at 543,000. Very cheap, and obviously at halfback, it's an interesting position. And I spoke a little bit about this with Mikey in the first preseason episode where we spoke about the Panthers because we obviously had to have the Cleary discussion. Do you start with Cleary or not? And we were at a stalemate. We both thought you could do it or you could not do it. But then when you go down from Cleary, the problem is that you've got Hines and Hughes and then not really anything else. And then you've got Moses a lot cheaper. Like you're talking about saving almost $300,000 from the top tier guy to Moses, which is a lot of money. And then when you start to talk yourself into it, you can find some real good arguments and narratives to go with. And the first one's a statistical one. He scored 56 points per game last year. It was very hampered. And the years before, he's gone 64, 68, and 70. So it was a lot less than his 3 years prior. He is still at his peak of his powers, really, as long as he stays healthy. But the big thing, obviously, really, is that you've got Zach Lomax gone. And he took the goal-kicking tee off Mitchell Moses. Mitchell Moses now has it back. So you'd expect maybe 12 points per game just organically added onto his average. If you just put that onto his 56, that's 68 points per game right there. And then if you say last year he was down a little bit, he's probably got an extra 2 or 3 points. All of a sudden you're getting back to that 70-plus average of 2022, 14 points undervalued, and you can really talk yourself into it for a good price of 543,000. Obviously, he relies entirely on his attacking stats, but with the goal kicking, I can see why people are actually going for it.
I think 12 points a game is pretty generous. You go back.
You don't think your Eels are going to score points?
Oh no, they will. I'm not going to be too. Just have a quick look at the 2024 stats. All right, so they only play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games there. Right. This is with the goal kicking: 33, 36, 116, 86. 51, 61, 103, 28. So even with the goal kicking, he's still got those piss poor games in there.
He's always been rocks or diamonds.
Yeah. But the flat track bully games, like they were versus Souths, Penrith, and Bulldogs. But for 3 of the first 4 games, mate, he's got his points for goal kicking. 4 points in that first game, 4 points in the second, 4 points in the third. Then he had 16 net, then 12. Then 10, 8, 6. So I think 12 is a bit too generous, mate.
Oh, look, it obviously the stats are going to even out across the season, but I'd be surprised if it's not 10 to 12 for the season.
I'd be fair and out of 8. Sorry.
I reckon 8's not generous enough, but I think that your argument becomes much more valid when you have a look at the matchups because against the Melbourne Storm, he's got a career average of 46. It's his second worst. Broncos are in his top 4 worst averages in his career as well. And I like that you mentioned flat track bully because he is a guy that does put up his big scores against the weaker sides a lot of the time. And that doesn't normally equate to the start of the season where a lot of sides are actually playing a lot better to start the year. And we've spoken about this before in this podcast a lot, where at the start of the year, teams aren't injured and the injuries normally bring the better teams to the top and the worst teams without the depth get, dragged down a little bit. And everyone's, raring to go for the season. So the start of the year, there's not much flat track bully games to be had, even when you got a decent draw, and they probably don't have that. So that, I think that's the biggest concern with him, isn't it? Like, you could look at it and go, look, that third game against the Dragons is okay, but if he has 3 poor scores in that first 4, how far behind are you from those that maybe started, Hines or a Cleary? And the answer is probably going to be pretty far behind. So there is a bit of risk, and he could very well average 42 points across that first 4 weeks.
Yeah. I suppose it's a matter of, don't look at him and think he's going to average 70 or 80 and then get disappointed if he doesn't hit whatever it is that you think he's going to get. Maybe just have a look at all the number 7s available, take Cleary out of the equation and think, okay, so how is he going to go comparatively to all these other options available? Because that's the only reason you get him, because you can't afford the other bloke.
I tell you what I looked at, and you might laugh at me here. I looked at halfback, and I looked at it a lot with Mitchell Moses, and went, you know what? I think I'd rather boom or bust. I would rather just spend up and have Cleary or even Hines, or I'll just go double cheapies, rather than risk it with Moses, maybe scoring poorly. Maybe if I have Ethan Sanders and Atkinson, one of those guys can average 40 and across the first month. When you consider the 500k, the 300k difference, isn't much difference really if I just go that route of the cheapies.
You still got one player that doesn't count, right?
That's right. Yep. Top 17 out of your 18 are scoring.
So if he scores well, great. If he doesn't, then hope that your centre 3/4 are good enough that you're not going to get a 2 or a 3 out of them.
It's got to be mentioned too that Moses got 13 and 18 games under his belt the last 2 years, so he hasn't played a lot of football, and that's a bit of a worry with his injuries now for the last couple of years. So definitely polarising, Billy. It's not an easy one, and there isn't a lot of halfbacks when you go past that first 3 elite guys to consider. He will be a pod, though. When we're looking about pods, though, we do a thing on this podcast, which is a Big Balls pod, and that is a pod beyond a pod. It's maybe a 1-2% type-owned guy, and not many people are going to look at it. Is it worth it? Is it more of a draft option to maybe have a look at for some value? I originally put Simonson there, and then Brian Kelly signed, so now I've got Simonson/Kelly. I've got to say, I've got to say this story because I like to give a shout out to some of the listeners, Billy, sometimes. And I remember this very well. I'm pretty sure it was Rick Pacey, I'm pretty sure. 2023, he went, Barnesy, I like Simonson. What do you think? And I was like, no, not really. And he said, oh, look, I know he's bad a lot of the time, but he has these little gems to his game that he can put together. Anyway, Simonson in 2023, from around 10 to 19, averaged 74 points per game, scored 8 tries, and was one of the best centre wings for a third of the season in that middle portion of the year. It was a really good run, and I tipped my hat off to Rick, and I was like, mate, you have hit gold and done really well. Now, obviously, Simonson doesn't really normally do that. He might be out of the side if he doesn't get one of those wing spots. Brian Kelly's probably in the centres. And then you got Brian Kelly, a guy that I think has been popular in SuperCoach in the past because he's had pretty good base power, and then he's also scored a lot of tries as an attacking guy. But he went from 2023's 64 average down to a 60 average, down to a 56 average. So there is a decent argument that he needed a bit of career rejuvenation to go somewhere else, and that there might be 8 points per game plus in value. And he is a bit of a try scorer. And it's one of those things where at 550,000, it's a bridge too far for me. I think that those type of guys, you might take a punt at 400k. He's just that little bit too pricey for me. But I wouldn't be surprised, Billy, if, this is kind of last chance saloon for Brian Kelly. He's got a bit of a point to prove with his career, and he comes in and actually goes decent for you guys.
Yeah, we have our moments, like Eels win-loss statistic at our home ground is I'm not going to say it's like the fortress at sort of Manly, but it's pretty strong the last few years. You get a few games under the belt with him there. The fact that any new player always tries to stand up and be counted for his new team, just to show that he's got some decent value, cement that they're worth the money that's been paid for them. Get the fans on side, so he's going to go out and go hard. Tough draw, but he's going to go out and go hard. Only other thing I was going to add just on the Simonson part that you were just talking about, that was between round 10 and 19 when everyone was rested or depleted from Origin, when he scored at least 1 or 2 tries per game. When teams are ranked the first third and the second third of the season, did nothing. So if you like Simo, wait till everyone's injured in other teams.
Well, funny number with Brian Kelly.
On that one, but nice try, Rick.
Well, it made he hit it. I wasn't going to buy him, but he did. And I say with Brian Kelly too, in 2024, almost 60% of the time he went 60 plus as well. So he was actually a lot more consistent because, again, that base power, he gets those tackle breaks and things, and he can score some tries on top of that. So it might be a bit of a sneaky, I reckon, for draft. You get to your final rounds where you throw in some centre wings. I wouldn't mind having a stab and seeing how he goes. But overall for Classic, bridge too far.
Mate, I'm just going to throw something out there very quickly. The last 5 years I've been doing Big Bash cricket in SuperCoach just for a bit of fun, just to get me interested a bit. I'm a test purist. I'm not going to say I hate BBL, but I don't like watching it. So I'm doing it just for that and to keep the SuperCoach interest. I don't know half the players. So all I've been doing is, the dual matchups, but also just picking players versus opposition. Mate, I've finished in the top 300 5 years in a row in a game that I hate, and I struggle to finish top 2,000 in NRL. So the moral of the story here is, if you want to just pick players on matchups, go for it. Like, the players are an average for a year. They're always going to go well versus lower teams and struggle versus top teams and have some anomalies in those games. But law of averages are, you're generally going to go better against the poorer teams. So if you got a team with a soft run and you got a 400, 500K guy that you want to pick for 6 weeks, just do it. There's no reason not to have them. All they need to look at Alex Johnson. All he needs to do is catch the ball and fall over the line. Just wait for the run. Don't mind the fact that he's averaging 20. Find the run and hit it.
Sage advice there. When they're cheap as well, preferably. But I've been doing NFL, NBL, and NBA. I follow 2 out of those 3 sports. But I tell you, NFL I don't, and I finished top 1,000, I think it was. So pretty much the same thing. So it is a bit of fun though. I'm glad that SuperCoach is doing so many sports now. I quite like it. Let's move along to a few other options. We've got a rising gun. Katoga was quite good last year, and this is more of a shout out than anything, because I tell you, I can't find a way that I could consider him. He should be your starting edge back rower, Billy, but because of his season last year, he averaged 55 points a game. 537,000 is a bit awkward for a second rower, but does he have a heap of improvement in him? Is that going to happen? Because it's his sophomore season, second year as a forward. Generally, that can happen with these guys, and he could go from 55 to a 65 potentially, because I really like the look of him. He's got that type of ability where he looks like he could increase his tackle breaks a lot, and he looks like he could be a target for some short balls as well on that side. So I really quite like him in draft really late as a real flyer. I can't do it in Classic, but am I being a bit too hard on him? Like, can he be someone that can be decent value there at 537k?
He can. I was just talking to someone at work about this today. Lovely guy called Joe, and his name came up, and he goes, "I really rate the kid, but he just needs to improve his defense." He said, "I think the coach has benched him because he's brilliant in attack, but his defensive reads aren't that great." He goes, "If you go and watch him, like, they'll run a decoy runner or the halfback will have it, and he just doesn't slide as well sometimes." And there were a lot of tries through him on that left side towards the end of the year. And I thought, geez, you really watch the game, don't you, Joe? He goes, "Oh, you used to play a little bit." He goes, "I love my footy." So I say, "You know what you're doing?" He goes, "Yeah. So where'd you play?" He goes, "I played with Rabbitohs for a little bit, but there are a couple of guys in front of me, a guy called Cameron Murray and Colin McTungy and Sam Burgess, so I never made it." But he goes, "Yeah, I know how to," but that's his problem, no? So
fair competition ahead of Joe there.
I mentioned
so
on the
unfortunate.
podcast, Joe. So he just needs to slide to a lungy.
Well, the mistaken or controversial take I'm going to throw in there, and we'll have this go into the mids and cheapies discussion because it's about hooker, right? We've got Riley Williams, who I think is going to be an error, and I think some newer coaches might be trapped into because he might be the starting 9. If De Silva's the starting 9, then all of a sudden at 235k, that presents some value, but how many minutes does he get? So a bit of a position battle, which is never great for SuperCoach. But I think one of the things with these two guys, we haven't seen enough of big minutes from De Silva yet, but he projects to be sort of a 47-ish type of average at 235k potentially because of his PPM that he does have. Now, can he maintain that PPM when he's doing bigger minutes, when he plays like 55 minutes? I'm not sure. At the moment, his PPM, though, is getting towards what Harry Grant has done the last couple of years, and that's really good. Obviously, Riley Smith on the bench is going to kill him from an 80-minute role, but if he can get a 55-minute role, then all of a sudden De Silva is actually decent value at 200k. You can plug him in as your second hooker and try and make some money. Riley Williams, though, as a starter, is already 100k plus more than what a De Silva is, and I just don't think that. I think that just negates his value entirely. But I can see some people going cheap at hooker Billy, seeing a Williams start there and going, oh yeah, I'll just throw him in as my second hooker. Not that he hasn't had talent. I think that he's had a lot of fans and he's done some good things. But yeah, I just see Williams as a bit of a mistake. But if De Silva starts, I actually see him as a discussion on do you start with him at 235k as your bench hooker.
Yeah, it depends on who your number one hooker is. Lots of people will be going with the same one or two. You've got to have something there as backup. I think the hooker and front row forward are always fraught with danger in that reserve spot. I think it's a position where people can get a little bit lax and go a bit too cheap, thinking, I'll just have a cheapy guy here. He'll play, sort of 40 minutes off the bench, make me 200k, and then I can upgrade. But they end up playing sort of 12 minutes and then losing money and going down from 290 to 200 or making 40, 50 grand, then you end up having to play them, and it's a bit more detrimental to your health. So I wouldn't be going with a bloke like that unless their base pricing going to increase rather quickly in sort of 6 or 7 weeks. I think you probably need to go to middies, really.
Yeah, I think there's too much value there at the moment, too many options. Even a Reece
Robbo.
Even a Reece Robson is under 500k, so you can go he's undervalued. But a Bailey Haywood has possibly got an 80-minute role now at 350-odd-k.
Yeah.
And then you've got a Reid Marnie at just over 400k. There's too many options at hooker this year to stuff around with a risk.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No point wasting it. I don't want to ruin anything for your Roosters podcast, but I am interested on your thoughts for 30 seconds. Robbo's stats aren't that kind of great, but he can have a really good game. How do you feel he'll go SuperCoach-wise in a much better team?
Well, it's hard, right? Because Robson, I think, still had decent attack at the Cowboys. As in, Cowboys had a decent attacking side, even though that they weren't, a perennial top 8 sort of side. But I think the biggest factor for me is what happens with Connor Watson. And that'll be a big talk on the podcast, because I think that Connor Watson wants to be a 13, and I think that Robinson, as in Trent Robinson, not Robson, Trent Robinson prefers an 80-minute hooker, and he's always been that way. If Robson is an 80-minute hooker, I think that he will brain it at the Roosters, and I think he's looking at sort of a 65 average. If he's going to play less, and even 15 minutes less is going to hurt him, then that's going to be an issue. So really, I think the key to Robson is actually going to be Connor Watson and where Watson's going to play, because there's also things that happen, like Nafua White ended up playing 13 a lot. Bradley went to an edge and then he went back to 13, and Bradley's now only going to miss 5 games, not 10. So that muddies the waters as well. I think what I would guess Robinson will do, and what I would do, is I would play Robson for the full 80. And I would have Watson as a backup if I need it, but he would be a 45-minute 13 off the bench. And I think that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I think
that happens, and it's great. But I really like Haywood too at the Bulldogs. I don't want to give away all the hooker, talk from all the others.
Leave those for the other podcasts. I think that he'll have a cracking year. My only concern, SuperCoach-wise, is probably needed to do a little bit too much, do a little bit extra at the Cows. You've got too many options on the left and the right. He just needs to feed, create the structure, and then just move them around the park.
Yeah. And one of the things at the Cows too is Robson's forward pack was not strong, and the Cows have struggled with that, particularly their middles, for a number of years now. And the Roosters don't have that problem, so I think that he'll love playing with that forward pack as well. One guy to finish on, Billy. Yep. Jonah Pezzett, a big recruit. You've only got him for 12 months. Bit of a point to prove. Comes in at 235k. Now, as a 8, it's a position that we've talked about before that isn't great in SuperCoach lately. And it again isn't great in SuperCoach. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he's a must-have for me because of the position, because of the opportunity, because of the price point at 235k. Now, Do I have really high expectations for him? I'm not sure, because we haven't seen a big sample size from him for a couple of years. But if you go back 2 years ago, he played 8 games, and all 8 of those games were, 7 games in 2023, and all 7 of those games were 80 minutes in the halves, and he averaged 47 points per game. Now, there's an argument that he's probably going to be better at this point. He's a lot more mature as a player. He's got a lot more experience under his belt in the NRL system. But that 47 seems like a pretty good baseline to me that he should be able to average, with maybe, towards the mid-50s as a possible if he's improved a little bit. And so at 200K in a position like 6, I can't not have him in my SuperCoach team for round 1.
Yeah, he's a backup. You're never going to play him. You don't have to. It's just pure cash. I'd like to think everyone gets him. I wouldn't be concerned about not playing him. I don't think anyone's going to play him and get 80, 90 points and have you fall behind. So I think he's just a safe buy, set, forget, leave him, and then cash in when the time is right.
100%. And probably a good thing to finish on, particularly for some of the newer players, is why these sort of guys are must-haves. When you got guys that have a 100% job security, there's nobody that's going to take Pez's job, that are basically bottom dollar.
Nah.
You gotta look at them for your round 1 side, because if you don't have those guys in your template, Billy, then you're going to miss out on too much cash generation and options to start the year. And also the spend that you're going to have in other positions is going to take a hit if you're not putting those guys in.
100%. The only reason you'll get rid of him is if, by some pure coincidence, someone comes out of the blue, has a few massive games, has a negative 200 break even, and you've got someone like, I don't know, Payne Haas or someone, and they get injured. You cull them to someone else, and you upgrade him to whoever really quickly, and you use that massive break even to get some cash, and then forget about him because he's going to burn too slow. That's all you do.
Yep. Round 1, get him in. That is Billy's podcast for the preseason. We will have him back on board in the future, though. So, Billy, thanks, mate, for jumping on the All-Stars podcast. Been a little while, but I enjoyed having you back, mate, just like old times.
Thanks, mate. Good to be on again. For all the listeners out there, thanks for the call out, the shout out. I won't be on every week. Mark's got plenty of other people to jump in, but I'll jump in a few from time to time.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Billy, People's Champion, Parramatta Eels fan, and thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to support the podcast, which I get asked, just follow us, please. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and also on Twitter, or I should say X, and you can subscribe everywhere, iTunes, Spotify, and also YouTube if you want to watch the show. So make sure that you do that. In the meantime, enjoy all your planning. Thanks very much for listening. Can't wait to talk more footy again real soon.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on.